Look around you. Every human face you see, every complex thought racing through your mind, every word you speak, and every tool you use represents the culmination of an extraordinary journey that began millions of years ago in the ancient forests of Africa. We are the descendants of tree-dwelling primates who learned to walk upright, primitive hunter-gatherers who discovered fire, and early farmers who built the first civilizations. But how did we get here? How did small, forest-dwelling apes transform into the dominant species on Earth? How did creatures with brains no larger than a chimpanzee evolve into beings capable of splitting atoms, composing symphonies, and exploring the cosmos? This is the story of human evolution, a tale of survival, innovation, and triumph that spans 7 million years. It's a journey through ice ages and climate changes, through the rise and fall of multiple human species, through the development of language, art, and civilization itself. Today, over 8 billion humans inhabit every corner of our planet, from the frozen Arctic to the scorching deserts, from bustling megacities to remote islands. We've built technologies that would seem like magic to our ancestors, created art that captures the deepest emotions of the human experience, and developed sciences that allow us to understand our place in the universe. Yet just a few million years ago, our ancestors were indistinguishable from other apes. They lived in trees, ate fruit and leaves, and had no inkling of the extraordinary destiny that awaited their descendants. The transformation from those early primates to modern humans represents one of the most remarkable evolutionary journeys in the history of life on Earth. This is our story, the story of how we became human. Chapter 1. The ancient WR story begins not in a laboratory or a library, but in the vast landscapes of ancient Africa, 7 to 10 million years ago, during the late Miocene epoch. This was a world unlike anything we know today, a planet where the climate was warmer, the continents were positioned differently, and life itself was experimenting with forms that would seem alien to modern eyes. During the Miocene period, much of Africa was covered by dense, subtropical forests that stretched from coast to coast. These weren't the relatively small patches of rainforest we see today, but vast, unbroken canopies that supported an incredible diversity of life. Countless species of primates swung through these ancient trees, living lives of abundance among the branches. The climate during this period was significantly warmer and more humid than today. There were no ice caps at the poles, no frozen tundra, stretching across the northern continents. Instead, warm, humid conditions prevailed across much of the globe, creating ideal environments for forest growth and primate evolution. In these primordial forests lived our earliest ancestors, primates. That would have been virtually indistinguishable from modern chimpanzees or gorillas to the casual observer. They spent their days foraging for fruits, nuts, and tender leaves in the forest canopy. They slept in nests built among the branches, safe from ground-dwelling predators. Their lives were governed by the rhythms of the forest, the changing seasons, the availability of food, and the constant need to avoid becoming prey themselves. These early primates possessed many of the characteristics we still see in our closest living relatives today. They had opposable thumbs that allowed them to grasp branches and manipulate objects with precision. Their eyes faced forward, providing the stereoscopic vision necessary for judging distances while swinging through trees. Their brains, while small by modern human standards, were already sophisticated enough to support complex social behaviors and basic tool use. But something was about to change in this ancient paradise. Deep beneath the Earth's surface, geological forces were reshaping the African continent. The East African Rift System, a massive crack in the Earth's crust that stretches from the Red Sea to Mozambique, was slowly tearing the continent apart. This geological upheaval was causing dramatic changes in topography. creating new mountain ranges and altering weather patterns across the region. As mountains rose along the Rift Valley, they began to interfere with the moisture-laden winds that had previously watered the vast forests of East Africa. Rain shadows formed behind these new mountain barriers, creating increasingly dry conditions in areas that had once been lush and green. Slowly but inexorably, the great forests began to fragment and retreat. Where once there had been continuous canopy, open woodlands appeared. Where woodlands had thrived, grasslands emerged. The comfortable, predictable world of the forest-dwelling primates was disappearing, replaced by a more challenging landscape of scattered trees, open spaces, and new opportunities for those bold enough to seize them. This environmental transformation set the stage for one of the most important events in the history of life on Earth, the emergence of the first hominids. Our ancestors were about to take their first tentative steps down from the trees and begin the long journey toward becoming human. The fossil record from this crucial period is frustratingly incomplete, but paleontologists have uncovered enough evidence to piece together the broad outlines of this transformation. In locations across East and Central Africa, researchers have discovered the remains of primates that show clear adaptations for life on the ground, as well as in the trees. These transitional fossils reveal creatures that were experimenting with new ways of moving through their changing environment. Some show modifications to the pelvis and leg bones that suggest occasional upright walking. Others display changes in tooth structure that indicate shifts in diet as forest foods became less available and new food sources had to be exploited. The emergence of our lineage wasn't a sudden event, but rather a gradual process of adaptation and experimentation that played out over millions of years. Multiple species of early hominins evolved during this period, each trying different approaches to survival in the changing African landscape. Some of these early experiments were more successful than others. Some lineages thrived for millions of years before eventually going extinct. Others gave rise to new species that would carry the human story forward. All of them contributed to the great experiment in terrestrial primate evolution that would ultimately produce our own species. As we stand at the beginning of this incredible journey, it's important to remember that nothing about human evolution was inevitable. At countless points along the way, our lineage could have gone extinct like so many others. The fact that we're here today to tell this story is the result of countless chance events, fortuitous mutations, and successful adaptations that allowed our ancestors to survive and thrive in an often hostile world. Chapter 2. The first STP, as around 7 million years ago, in the fragmenting forests of ancient Africa, one of the most significant transitions in the history of life on Earth began to unfold. Our ancestors were taking their first tentative steps toward bipedalism, the ability to walk upright on two legs. This seemingly simple change would prove to be the foundation upon which all subsequent human evolution would build. The transition to bipedalism wasn't sudden or dramatic. Evolution rarely works that way. Instead, it was a gradual process that unfolded over millions of years, with different species experimenting with various forms of upright locomotion. Some were more successful than others, but all contributed to the great experiment that would eventually produce fully bipedal hominins. The earliest evidence for bipedalism comes from a species called Sahelanthropus chadensis, discovered in the deserts of Chad in 2001. Dating to approximately 7 million years ago, Sahelanthropus represents one of the oldest known members of the human lineage. While much of its anatomy remains unknown, the position of the foramen magnum, the hole in the skull where the spine connects, suggests that this species may have walked upright, at least occasionally. More definitive evidence for early bipedalism comes from Ardipithecus ramidus, a species that lived in Ethiopia around 4.5 million years ago. Artie, as she's affectionately known to researchers, provides a fascinating glimpse into the anatomy and behavior of our early ancestors. She retained many ape-like characteristics, including long, curved fingers perfect for grasping tree branches, and a pelvis that was only partially adapted for upright walking. But it was Australopithecus afarensis, emerging around 3.9 million years ago, that would provide the most dramatic evidence for early bipedalism. The discovery of Lucy in 1974 revolutionized our understanding of human evolution, providing the first clear evidence that our ancestors were walking upright long before their brains began to expand significantly. Lucy's skeleton, about 40% complete, revealed a creature that was clearly adapted for life on the ground. Her pelvis was short and bowl-shaped, perfectly designed for supporting the weight of the upper body during bipedal locomotion. Her leg bones were angled in a way that allowed for efficient striding, while her foot bones showed adaptations for push-off during walking. Yet Lucy retained many primitive characteristics that revealed her recent arboreal ancestry. Her arms were long relative to her legs, her fingers were curved, and her brain was only slightly larger than that of a modern chimpanzee. She was, in many ways, a transitional creature, no longer fully ape, but not yet fully human. The question that has puzzled scientists for decades is why bipedalism evolved in the first place. Walking upright seems like such a natural human characteristic that we rarely consider how unusual it actually is among mammals. The vast majority of mammals, including our closest primate relatives, move on four legs. Bipedalism is energetically expensive, makes individuals more vulnerable to predators, and complicates childbirth. So why did our ancestors make this dramatic shift? Several theories have been proposed to explain the evolution of bipedalism. The savanna hypothesis suggests that as forests gave way to grasslands, our ancestors needed to walk upright to see over tall grass and spot predators or prey. The aquatic ape hypothesis proposes that our ancestors spent time wading in shallow water, which encouraged upright posture. The provisioning hypothesis suggests that males needed to carry food back to females and offspring, making upright walking advantageous. More recent research has focused on the energetic advantages of bipedalism. Studies have shown that while human walking is indeed more energy-intensive than quadrupedal locomotion for short distances, it becomes significantly more efficient for long-distance travel. In the increasingly open landscapes of ancient Africa, the ability to travel long distances efficiently would have been a significant advantage. Bipedalism also freed the hands for other activities. No longer needed for locomotion, the hands could be used for carrying objects, manipulating tools, and eventually creating the complex implements that would become hallmarks of human technology. This liberation of the hands was perhaps the most important consequence of upright walking, setting the stage for all subsequent technological development. The fossil footprints discovered at Latoli in Tanzania provide some of the most compelling evidence for early bipedalism. These remarkable traces, preserved in volcanic ash for over 3.5 million years, show 2 or possibly 3 individuals walking across the ancient landscape. The footprints reveal a fully committed bipedal gait, with clear heel strikes, weight transfer through the arch, and push-off from the big toe. What makes these footprints particularly poignant is the story they seem to tell. The smaller prints occasionally overlapped the larger ones, suggesting that a smaller individual, perhaps a child, was walking alongside a larger adult. For a brief moment, frozen in stone, we can glimpse the intimate family dynamics of our ancient ancestors. The development of bipedalism required numerous anatomical modifications that are still visible in the human skeleton today. The spine developed an S-shaped curve to help balance the head over the pelvis. The pelvis became shorter and broader to support the internal organs during upright posture. The legs became longer relative to the arms, and the angle of the thigh bone changed to position the knees directly under the center of gravity. Perhaps most remarkably, the skull underwent significant changes to accommodate bipedal posture. The foramen magnum moved from the back of the skull to a more central position, allowing the head to balance properly on top of the spine. These changes required precise coordination between multiple developmental pathways, highlighting the complexity of evolutionary adaptation. The social implications of bipedalism were equally profound. Upright walking changed how our ancestors interacted with each other and their environment. It allowed for new forms of visual communication, as facial expressions and body language became more important when individuals could see each other from greater distances. It may have contributed to the evolution of pair bonding and cooperative child rearing, as females needed more help caring for offspring whose births became more difficult due to pelvic modifications. As we trace the early evolution of bipedalism, we see the first glimmerings of the characteristics that would eventually make us human. The decision to stand upright, made by our ancestors millions of years ago in the changing landscapes of ancient Africa, set in motion a cascade of evolutionary changes that would ultimately lead to language, art, technology, and civilization itself. Chapter 3. The Teotihuacans approximately 2.5 million years ago. In the rocky landscapes of East Africa, one of our ancestors picked up a stone and deliberately struck it against another rock. The resulting sharp flake would become humanity's first intentionally manufactured tool, marking the beginning of a technological revolution that continues to this day. The emergence of stone tool technology represents one of the most significant milestones in human evolution. Unlike the occasional tool use we see in other primates, chimpanzees using sticks to extract termites or sea otters using rocks to crack open shells, human tool making was systematic, intentional, and cumulative. Each generation built upon the knowledge of the previous one, creating an ever-expanding toolkit that would eventually transform our species and our planet. The oldest known stone tools, discovered at sites like Gona in Ethiopia and Lomekvi in Kenya, date back approximately 3.3 million years. These simple implements, known as Old Dowan tools after the Olduvai Gorge, where they were first studied systematically, represent the dawn of human technology. They consisted primarily of choppers, scrapers, and cutting implements made by striking one stone against another to create sharp edges. While these early tools may seem crude by modern standards, their creation required sophisticated cognitive abilities that set our ancestors apart from other primates. Tool making demands forward planning, the ability to envision a future need and prepare for it. It requires an understanding of cause and effect, knowledge of material properties, and the motor skills necessary to execute precise striking motions. The creation of even the simplest stone tool involves a complex sequence of decisions and actions. The toolmaker must select appropriate raw materials, position the stones correctly, control the force and angle of impact, and adjust their technique based on the results. This process requires not just intelligence, but also the ability to learn from mistakes and improve performance over time. The identity of the first toolmakers has been a subject of intense debate among paleoanthropologists. For many years, the prevailing view was that toolmaking was the exclusive domain of our genus Homo. The oldest tools were attributed to Homo habilis, whose name literally means handy man. However, recent discoveries have complicated this picture, suggesting that multiple hominin species may have been experimenting with stone tool technology simultaneously. The discovery of cut marks on bones from sites in Ethiopia, dating to 3.4 million years ago, suggests that even Australopithecus afarensis, Lucy species, may have been using stone tools. While no tools have been found directly associated with these early cut marks, The evidence suggests that tool use may have a much deeper history in our lineage than previously thought. Homo habilis, emerging around 2.8 million years ago, was certainly among the most accomplished early toolmakers. This species, first discovered by Louis and Mary Leakey at Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, possessed a brain roughly 50% larger than that of Australopithecus species. This increase in brain size was accompanied by significant changes in behavior and lifestyle. Unlike their predecessors, who were primarily vegetarian, Homo habilis was clearly incorporating meat into their diet on a regular basis. Archaeological sites from this period are littered with animal bones bearing cut marks from stone tools, evidence of systematic butchering and meat processing. This dietary shift had profound implications for human evolution, providing the high-quality protein necessary to fuel continued brain growth. The transition to meat eating wasn't simply a matter of hunting large game. Instead, Homo habilis appears to have been primarily scavengers, using their stone tools to process carcasses killed by large predators. This scavenging strategy required sophisticated knowledge of predator behavior, seasonal migration patterns, and the locations of water sources where dying animals might be found. Toolmaking had social implications as well. The creation of stone implements required knowledge that had to be transmitted from one generation to the next. This created new forms of social learning and cooperation that went far beyond anything seen in other primates. Young hominins had to learn not just how to make tools, but when to use them, how to maintain them, and where to find suitable raw materials. The archaeological record suggests that Homo habilis was quite mobile, traveling considerable distances to obtain high-quality stone for toolmaking. At sites like Olduvai Gorge, researchers have found tools made from materials that originated dozens of miles away, indicating either long-distance travel or sophisticated trading networks. This mobility and resource acquisition planning demonstrates cognitive abilities that were becoming increasingly human-like. Around 1.8 million years ago, a new tool technology appeared in the archaeological record. The Achillean tradition, named after Saint-Achille in France, where examples were first studied, represented a quantum leap in technological sophistication. Instead of simple choppers and scrapers, toolmakers were now creating elegant, symmetrical hand axes that required hundreds of precise strikes to complete. These Achillean hand axes weren't just functional tools, they were works of art. Many display a level of symmetry and aesthetic appeal that seems to go beyond mere utility. Some researchers have suggested that these tools serve not just practical functions, but also social ones, perhaps indicating skill, status, or attractiveness to potential mates. The makers of these sophisticated implements belong to a new species, Homo erectus. Emerging around 2 million years ago, Homo erectus represented a major step toward modern human anatomy and behavior. They were tall, fully bipedal, and possessed brains that were significantly larger than their predecessors. Though still smaller than modern humans, Homo erectus was also the first hominin to expand beyond Africa, spreading across Asia and establishing populations from the Caucasus to Java. This global expansion was made possible, in part, by their sophisticated tool technology, which allowed them to adapt to a wide variety of environments and exploit new food sources. The control of fire, which may have first been achieved by Homo erectus around 1 million years ago, represented another technological milestone. Fire provided warmth, protection from predators, and the ability to cook food. Cooking had profound implications for human evolution, making nutrients more accessible and potentially contributing to its further brain expansion. The social implications of fire control were equally important. Fires created gathering places where individuals could share food, exchange information, and strengthen social bonds. The light provided by fires extended the active day, allowing for new forms of social interaction and cultural development. As we trace the early history of human technology, we see the emergence of characteristics that would define our species: the ability to envision future needs, the capacity for cumulative cultural learning, and the drive to continuously improve and innovate. These early toolmakers, working with nothing but stones and their own ingenuity, laid the foundation for all subsequent technological development, from the pyramids of Egypt to the computers that surround us today. Chapter 4. The Great Emergence. 18 million years ago, a small group of early humans stood at the edge of the African continent, gazing across the Sinai Peninsula toward the unknown lands of Asia. These weren't modern humans, but Homo erectus, our ancient relatives who would become the first members of the human lineage to venture beyond the continent where our species was born. This moment represents one of the most significant events in human history: the first great migration out of Africa. For millions of years, all of human evolution had taken place on the African continent. Our ancestors had evolved from tree-dwelling primates to upright walking toolmakers without ever leaving their ancestral homeland. But Homo erectus was about to change all that, embarking on a journey that would take humanity to the far corners of the earth. The decision to leave Africa wasn't a conscious choice in the way we might understand it today. These early humans weren't driven by wanderlust or scientific curiosity. Instead, their expansion was likely driven by more immediate concerns: the search for food, the pressure of growing populations, and a natural tendency of successful species to expand into new territories. The world that Homo erectus encountered outside Africa was vastly different from the landscapes they had known. The Pleistocene epoch had begun, bringing with it a series of ice ages that would dramatically alter global climate patterns. In the north, massive ice sheets covered much of Europe and Asia. Sea levels were lower, exposing land bridges that would later disappear beneath rising waters. Yet, despite these challenges, Homo erectus proved remarkably adaptable. Within a few 100,000 years of leaving Africa, they had established populations across Asia, from the mountains of Georgia to the tropical islands of Indonesia. This rapid expansion demonstrates an impressive ability to adapt to diverse environments and exploit new ecological niches. The fossil record of this great migration is written in sites scattered across 2 continents. At Manisi in Georgia, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of some of the earliest humans to reach Asia, dating to approximately 1.8 million years ago. These individuals were smaller and had smaller brains than many later Homo erectus populations, suggesting that the migration out of Africa began earlier and involved more primitive populations than previously thought. The Benenisi fossils reveal a group of early humans who were clearly struggling to adapt to their new environment. Some individuals show evidence of serious injuries and diseases that would have made survival difficult. Yet they persevered, establishing what may have been the first human settlement outside Africa. As Homo erectus populations spread across Asia, they encountered environments unlike anything their ancestors had experienced in Africa. In the tropical forests of Southeast Asia, they had to adapt to new food sources, different predators, and unfamiliar diseases. In the more temperate regions of northern Asia, they faced the challenges of seasonal variation and periodic cold snaps that would test their ability to find food and maintain body temperature. The archaeological evidence suggests that different populations of Homo erectus developed different strategies for dealing with these challenges. In China, fossil sites like Jiaqudian reveal evidence of sophisticated fire use, including hearths that were maintained for extended periods. These early humans were not just using fire opportunistically, but were actively managing it as a crucial survival tool. The tools found at Asian Homo erectus sites show both continuities with African traditions and innovations adapted to local conditions. While the basic Acheulean hand axe tradition continued in some areas, other populations developed different tool technologies better suited to their specific environments. In Southeast Asia, where suitable stone for tool making was scarce, populations made greater use of bamboo and other organic materials that rarely preserve in the archaeological record. The expansion of Homo erectus wasn't just a single migration, but rather a series of movements over hundreds of thousands of years. Different populations left Africa at different times, followed different routes, and encountered different challenges. Some were more successful than others, leading to the complex pattern of human diversity we see in the fossil record. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Homo erectus expansion is how quickly these early humans adapted to marine environments. The journey to Java, in modern-day Indonesia, required crossing significant bodies of water, even when sea levels were at their lowest. This suggests that Homo erectus had developed some form of watercraft, or at least had the courage and skill to cross dangerous waters on makeshift rafts. The ability to cross water barriers opened up entirely new worlds for human exploration. Islands that had been isolated for millions of years suddenly became accessible to human colonization. This expansion into island environments would provide important lessons in adaptation that would serve later human species well when they began their own migrations. The success of Homo erectus in Asia had profound implications for human evolution. For the first time, human populations were evolving in isolation from each other over vast geographic distances. This geographic separation led to the development of regional variations in anatomy, behavior, and technology that would characterize human evolution for the next million years. Some researchers have suggested that the Asian populations of Homo erectus may have given rise to later human species, including our own. While this multi-regional model of human evolution has fallen out of favor in recent years, there's no doubt that the Asian expansion of Homo erectus represents a crucial chapter in the human story. The environmental challenges faced by Homo erectus in Asia also drove continued innovation and adaptation. The need to survive in diverse climates led to improvements in tool technology, more sophisticated use of fire, and possibly the development of crude shelters and clothing. These innovations would prove crucial when later human species faced even greater environmental challenges. Perhaps most importantly, the success of Homo erectus demonstrated that humans could thrive outside Africa. This proof of concept paved the way for later migrations that would eventually bring modern humans to every habitable continent on Earth. The courage and adaptability of these early migrants set a precedent that would define human expansion for the next 2 million years. As we follow the footsteps of Homo erectus across ancient Asia, we see the emergence of a truly global human presence for the first time. These early pioneers, armed with little more than stone tools and the ability to control fire, proved that humans could adapt to virtually any environment on Earth. Their success set the stage for the even more remarkable expansions that would follow. Chapter 5. The brain builds around 800,000 years ago. In the caves and open landscapes of Africa and Europe, a remarkable transformation was taking place in the human lineage. Our ancestors' brains were growing at an unprecedented rate, expanding from the chimp-sized craniums of early hominins to volumes approaching those of modern humans. This neurological revolution would prove to be one of the most important developments in the entire history of life on Earth. The species driving this transformation was Homo heidelbergensis, a tall, robust hominin that lived between roughly 800,000 and 200,000 years ago. Named after a jawbone discovered near Heidelberg, Germany, this species represented a major leap forward in human evolution, possessing brains that averaged around 1,200 cubic centimeters, nearly 90% the size of modern human brains. The brain size alone doesn't tell the whole story. What made Homo heidelbergensis truly remarkable was what they did with their enlarged brains. These early humans demonstrated levels of planning, cooperation, and technological sophistication that far exceeded anything seen in earlier hominin species. They were, in many ways, the first truly modern minds inhabiting still primitive bodies. The archaeological record reveals that Homo heidelbergensis was capable of extraordinary feats of coordination and planning. At sites like Schningen in Germany, archaeologists have uncovered wooden spears dating to around 400,000 years ago. These weren't crude, sharpened sticks, but sophisticated hunting weapons carved from carefully selected wood and balanced for maximum throwing efficiency. The creation of these spears required an understanding of aerodynamics, knowledge of wood properties, and the ability to plan complex, multi-step manufacturing processes. The hunters who made these weapons had to envision their use, select appropriate trees, season the wood properly, and shape it with stone tools into perfectly balanced projectiles. This level of technological sophistication represents a quantum leap from the simple choppers and hand axes of earlier periods, but perhaps even more impressive than the spears themselves is what they tell us about Homo heidelbergensis hunting behavior. Analysis of animal bones from Schningen reveals that these early humans were taking down massive prey, including horses, red deer, and even elephants. Such hunting required unprecedented levels of cooperation, communication, and strategic thinking. Imagine the planning required to hunt a woolly rhinoceros or a straight-tusked elephant. Hunters would need to track their prey, coordinate their movements, anticipate the animal's behavior, and execute complex group strategies that required split-second timing and absolute trust in their companions. This level of cooperative hunting represents a cognitive revolution that laid the groundwork for all subsequent human social complexity. The sites where Homo heidelbergensis lived provide fascinating insights into their daily lives and social structures. At Terra Mata in France, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of what may be the oldest human shelters, oval structures, made from branches and stones that provided protection from wind and rain. These weren't permanent dwellings, but rather temporary camps that demonstrate an understanding of architecture and spatial organization. Fire use reached new levels of sophistication during this period. Instead of simply maintaining fires started by natural causes, Homo heidelbergensis was deliberately creating fire and using it for multiple purposes. Evidence from sites across Europe and Africa shows that they were cooking food, hardening wooden tools, and possibly even using fire to modify landscapes through controlled burning. The social implications of advanced fire use cannot be overstated. Fire created focal points around which groups could gather, share food, and exchange information. The light provided by fires extended the useful day, allowing for activities that would have been impossible in darkness. Most importantly, the maintenance of fire required cooperation and planning, strengthening social bonds and creating new forms of cultural transmission. Language likely underwent significant development during the Homo heidelbergensis period, though direct evidence for speech is difficult to find in the archaeological record. However, the level of coordination required for their hunting activities and tool manufacture strongly suggests sophisticated communication abilities. The hyoid bone, a small bone in the throat that's crucial for speech, shows modern proportions in some Homo heidelbergensis fossils, indicating that they possess the anatomical prerequisites for complex speech. The geographic distribution of Homo heidelbergensis was truly impressive, spanning Africa, Europe, and possibly parts of Asia. This wide distribution, combined with their apparent success in diverse environments, suggests a level of adaptability that exceeded that of any previous hominin species. They were equally at home in the tropical grasslands of Africa, and the temperate forests of Europe. Regional variations in Homo heidelbergensis populations provide early evidence for the cultural diversity that would become such a hallmark of later human evolution. European populations developed different tool traditions than their African counterparts, suggesting that cultural learning and innovation were becoming increasingly important factors in human adaptation. The treatment of the dead during this period shows the first glimmerings of symbolic behavior and spiritual thinking. While clear evidence for burial practices doesn't appear until later in human evolution, some Homo heidelbergensis sites show evidence that bodies were deliberately placed in caves or protected locations, suggesting at least rudimentary concepts of death and afterlife. The brain expansion that characterized Homo heidelbergensis came with significant costs. Larger brains require enormous amounts of energy. The human brain today consumes about 20% of our total caloric intake, despite comprising only 2% of body weight. This energetic demand would have required changes in diet, digestion, and foraging strategies that affected every aspect of daily life. The solution appears to have been an increased reliance on high-quality foods, particularly meat and cooked plant foods. Cooking made nutrients more accessible and reduced the energetic costs of digestion, freeing up energy for brain maintenance and growth. This created a positive feedback loop. Better nutrition supported larger brains, which enabled more sophisticated tool use and hunting strategies, which provided access to even better nutrition. The fossil record suggests that Homo heidelbergensis populations were generally healthy and well-nourished, supporting the idea that their advanced cognitive abilities were providing significant survival advantages. However, they also faced new challenges related to their complex social structures and cooperative behaviors. Evidence from sites like Atapuerca in Spain suggests that some Homo heidelbergensis populations may have engaged in cannibalism during times of stress. While disturbing to modern sensibilities, this behavior demonstrates the complex moral and social frameworks that were beginning to emerge in human societies. The fact that such behavior was apparently rare suggests that most groups had developed social norms that discouraged violence against other group members. As we examine the achievements of Homo heidelbergensis, we see the emergence of characteristics that would define all subsequent human evolution: sophisticated planning abilities, complex social cooperation, advanced technology, and the beginnings of symbolic thought. These early humans were building the cognitive and cultural foundations upon which all later human achievements would rest. Chapter 6. The Neanderthal Esteroi in the valleys of Europe and the mountains of Western Asia. A parallel experiment in human evolution was unfolding. While our direct ancestors were developing their own sophisticated cultures in Africa, a different branch of the human family tree was adapting to the harsh conditions of Ice Age Europe. These were the Neanderthals, our closest extinct relatives and perhaps the most misunderstood humans who ever lived. The Neanderthal story begins around 400,000 years ago, when populations of Homo heidelbergensis that had settled in Europe began to diverge from their African counterparts. Isolated by geography and shaped by the unique challenges of glacial Europe, these populations gradually developed the distinctive characteristics that would define the Neanderthal lineage. The environment that shaped Neanderthal evolution was harsh beyond modern imagination. During the depth of ice ages, much of northern Europe was covered by glaciers, hundreds of feet thick. Even in southern regions that remained ice-free, winters were brutal, lasting for months and bringing temperatures far below anything experienced by tropical African populations. These extreme conditions forged Neanderthals into perhaps the most cold-adapted humans who ever lived. Their stocky, robust build was perfectly designed for conserving body heat in freezing temperatures. Their large nasal passages warmed and humidified incoming air, preventing lung damage from breathing frigid air. Their massive muscle attachments and thick bones reflected lives of incredible physical demands. But Neanderthals were far more than just brutish. Cave dwellers adapted for surviving in frozen wastelands. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed them to be sophisticated people with complex cultures, advanced technologies, and rich emotional lives that rivaled those of any human population. The Neanderthal brain was actually larger on average than that of modern humans, averaging around 1,500 cubic centimeters compared to our 1,350. This extra neural capacity was put to good use, as evidenced by their remarkable technological achievements and cultural sophistication. Neanderthal stone tool technology reached levels of complexity that wouldn't be matched by modern humans for thousands of years. Their live-al-war technique involved preparing stone cores in precise ways that allowed for the removal of predetermined flake shapes. This process required extraordinary spatial visualization, abilities and understanding of fracture mechanics that speaks to highly developed cognitive skills. Even more impressive was their mastery of hafting, attaching stone points to wooden handles to create composite tools. This technology required advanced planning, sophisticated understanding of materials properties, and precise manual skills. The resulting spears and other hafted tools were far more effective than anything that could be created from stone alone. The control of fire reached new heights in Neanderthal societies. They weren't just maintaining fires started by lightning or volcanic activity, but were creating fire on demand using techniques that required considerable skill and knowledge. At sites like Beech's Pit in England, archaeologists have found evidence of fire-making dating back 400,000 years. Neanderthals were also accomplished hunters, capable of taking down the largest and most dangerous prey in their environment. Mammoth bone accumulations at sites across Europe testified to their ability to hunt these massive animals, which could weigh up to 6 tons and stood over 10 feet tall. Such hunting required unprecedented levels of cooperation, strategic planning, and courage. The social structure of Neanderthal groups appears to have been complex and sophisticated. Evidence from sites like Shanidar Cave in Iraq suggested they cared for disabled and elderly group members, demonstrating compassion and social cooperation that goes far beyond mere survival instincts. One individual from Shanidar had survived for years despite being blind in one eye, having a withered arm, and suffering from other serious disabilities. Perhaps most remarkably, Neanderthals appear to have been the first humans to deliberately bury their dead. At multiple sites across Europe and the Middle East, archaeologists have found Neanderthal skeletons in clearly artificial graves, sometimes accompanied by tools, animal bones. Perhaps most remarkably, Neanderthals appear to have been the first humans to deliberately bury their dead. At multiple sites across Europe and the Middle East, archaeologists have found Neanderthal skeletons in clearly artificial graves, sometimes accompanied by tools, animal bones, and even flowers. This behavior suggests not only an understanding of death, but also possibly beliefs about an afterlife or spiritual realm. The symbolic behavior of Neanderthals extended beyond burial practices. Recent discoveries have revealed that they created the world's first known cave paintings, predating the famous art of modern humans by tens of thousands of years. At sites like Cueva de los Aviones in Spain, archaeologists have found perforated shells and pigments that were clearly used for body decoration and artistic expression. Neanderthal communication abilities have been the subject of intense debate among researchers. While they possess the anatomical prerequisites for speech, including a modern hyoid bone and appropriate vocal tract proportions, questions remained about their cognitive capacity for language. Recent genetic analysis has provided compelling evidence that Neanderthals possessed the same version of the FOXP2 gene that's associated with speech and language development in modern humans. The daily life of Neanderthal families was rich and complex. They lived in small, closely knit groups that rarely exceeded 30 individuals. These groups were highly mobile, following seasonal migration patterns of prey, animals, and exploiting different resources as they became available throughout the year. Their intimate knowledge of their environment was encyclopedic, encompassing everything from animal behavior to plant phenology to weather patterns. Women in Neanderthal society appear to have played crucial roles in group survival. Analysis of wear patterns on teeth suggests that Neanderthal women were involved in processing hides, manufacturing tools, and possibly even participating in hunting activities. The division of labor was likely more flexible than in many later human societies, with survival taking precedence over rigid gender roles. The relationship between Neanderthals and the environment was one of careful balance and sustainable exploitation. Despite living through multiple ice ages and facing constant resource challenges, archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthal populations rarely overexploited their environments. They developed sophisticated strategies for resource management that allowed them to thrive in Europe for over 200,000 years. Neanderthal child-rearing practices reveal touching insights into their emotional lives. Evidence suggests that children were breastfed for extended periods and received intensive care and education from multiple group members. The transmission of complex technological knowledge from one generation to the next required patience, skill, and sophisticated teaching abilities that speak to the depth of Neanderthal culture. The interaction between Neanderthals and the large mammals of Ice Age Europe was complex and multifaceted. They weren't just hunters, but also scavengers, competitors, and sometimes prey themselves. Cave bears, cave lions, and other massive predators shared the European landscape with Neanderthals, creating a dynamic ecosystem where survival required constant vigilance and adaptation. As climate began to warm at the end of the last ice age, Neanderthal populations faced new challenges. The cold-adapted megafauna that had sustained them for millennia began to disappear, replaced by smaller, more mobile prey that required different hunting strategies. Forest expansion reduced the open grasslands where large herds had grazed, fragmenting Neanderthal territories and making their traditional lifestyle increasingly difficult to maintain. Around the same time, a new competitor appeared on the European landscape: anatomically modern humans. These newcomers, arriving from Africa via the Middle East, brought with them technologies and cultural practices that had been refined over hundreds of thousands of years in diverse African environments. The meeting between Neanderthals and modern humans would prove to be one of the most significant events in human prehistory. The interaction between these two human species was complex and varied across different regions and time periods. In some areas, they appear to have coexisted peacefully for thousands of years, possibly even trading tools and materials. In other regions, competition for resources may have led to conflict and displacement. Genetic evidence has revealed that the relationship between Neanderthals and modern humans was even more intimate than previously suspected. DNA analysis shows that interbreeding occurred multiple times and in multiple locations, resulting in Neanderthal genetic contributions that can still be found in modern human populations today. Most people of European and Asian ancestry carry between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA. This genetic legacy has had profound implications for modern human biology. Neanderthal genes have been linked to enhanced immune function, improved cold tolerance, and even certain cognitive abilities. However, some Neanderthal genetic variants have also been associated with increased susceptibility to certain diseases, highlighting the complex nature of our inherited genetic diversity. The final chapter of the Neanderthal story remains one of the most poignant in human prehistory. Around 40,000 years ago, the last Neanderthal populations disappeared from their final refugia in southern Spain and Portugal. The causes of their extinction remain debated, but likely involved a combination of climate change, competition with modern humans, and possibly disease outbreaks that their small population sizes couldn't withstand. The loss of the Neanderthals represents one of the great tragedies of human evolution. These remarkable people, who had survived in Europe for over 200,000 years through multiple ice ages and countless environmental challenges, finally succumbed to pressures they couldn't overcome. Their extinction left modern humans as the sole surviving members of the genus Homo, ending millions of years of human species diversity. Yet, in another sense, the Neanderthals never truly went extinct. Their genes live on in billions of modern humans, and their cultural achievements continue to inform our understanding of human potential and creativity. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new aspects of Neanderthal sophistication, forcing us to constantly revise our understanding of these remarkable people. The Neanderthal story serves as a powerful reminder of the diversity and richness of human evolution. For most of our evolutionary history, multiple human species shared the planet, each adapting to different environments and developing unique cultural solutions to survival challenges. The Neanderthals represent one of the most successful of these experiments, and their achievements stand as testament to the flexibility and creativity that have always characterized the human lineage. As we continue to study Neanderthal remains and archaeological sites, we're gaining new appreciation for the complexity and sophistication of these ancient people. They weren't failed experiments or evolutionary dead ends, but rather successful humans who developed their own unique approaches to the challenges of existence. Their story enriches our understanding of what it means to be human and reminds us that there are many different ways to successfully navigate the challenges of life on Earth. Chapter 7. The emergence of modern humans around 300,000 years ago. In the diverse landscapes of Africa, a new chapter in human evolution was beginning to unfold. The species that would eventually come to dominate the entire planet was taking its first tentative steps toward the characteristics that define us today. These early Homo sapiens represented the culmination of millions of years of evolutionary experimentation, combining the best traits of their predecessors while developing revolutionary new capabilities that would transform the world. The earliest fossils that can be definitively assigned to our species come from sites across Africa, including Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, Homo Kibish in Ethiopia, and Florisbad in South Africa. These remains reveal people who were recognizably modern in many ways, yet still retained some primitive characteristics that linked them to their hominin ancestors. The skulls of early Homo sapiens show the distinctive features that characterize our species today: high rounded foreheads, housing enlarged frontal lobes, reduced brow ridges, smaller faces tucked beneath the brain case, and chins that protrude forward. These anatomical changes reflect fundamental reorganization of the brain and modifications to the skull that would have profound implications for human behavior and capabilities. But the most significant changes were occurring inside those enlarged skulls. The human brain was undergoing a final phase of expansion and reorganization that would create the cognitive architecture underlying all subsequent human achievement. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning, abstract thinking, and impulse control, reached modern proportions. Language areas became more highly developed, supporting the complex communication systems that would become humanity's greatest advantage. The early representatives of our species weren't immediately recognizable as the world-conquering humans they would become. For the first 100,000 years of Homo sapiens' existence, their technology and behavior remained relatively conservative. showing only gradual improvements over their predecessors. They made stone tools using techniques inherited from earlier hominins, lived in small groups, and survived through hunting and gathering much as humans had for millions of years. However, beneath this apparent continuity, fundamental changes were occurring in human cognition and culture. Archaeological evidence suggests that early Homo sapiens were developing new forms of symbolic behavior, abstract thinking, and social organization that would eventually revolutionize human society. One of the earliest signs of this cognitive revolution appears in the form of ochre, a red pigment that humans began collecting and processing around 300,000 years ago. Initially, ochre may have been used for practical purposes like hide processing or insect repellent. However, over time, its use became increasingly symbolic, with evidence suggesting it was used for body painting, cave decoration, and possibly even early forms of artistic expression. The development of more sophisticated hunting strategies during this period reveals the growing cognitive capabilities of early Homo sapiens. Instead of the opportunistic scavenging and simple hunting practiced by earlier hominins, these early humans were developing complex, coordinated hunting techniques that required unprecedented levels of planning and cooperation. At sites like Kathupan in South Africa, archaeologists have found evidence that early Homo sapiens were systematically hunting large mammals using sophisticated spear technology. The tips of these spears show evidence of hafting techniques that created composite tools far more effective than anything made by earlier human species. The social organization of early Homo sapiens groups appears to have been more complex than that of their predecessors. Evidence from multiple sites suggests that group sizes were larger and social networks more extensive. This increased social complexity would have required new forms of communication, cooperation, and conflict resolution to push the boundaries of human cognitive abilities. Language underwent crucial developments during this period, though the exact timing and nature of these changes remain subjects of intense research and debate. The anatomical prerequisites for modern speech were clearly present in early Homo sapiens, including appropriate vocal tract proportions and neural organization. However, the full flowering of human language capabilities may have taken tens of thousands of years to fully develop. The archaeological record suggests that symbolic behavior became increasingly important in early Homo sapiens societies. Beyond ochre use, evidence includes the creation of ornamental objects, the development of burial practices with grave goods, and possibly even early forms of artistic expression. These behaviors indicate cognitive capabilities that went far beyond mere survival, suggesting the emergence of abstract thinking, aesthetic sense, and spiritual beliefs. Climate played a crucial role in shaping early Homo sapiens evolution. The period between 300,000 and 50,000 years ago was characterized by extreme climate variability, with rapid shifts between glacial and interglacial conditions. These environmental challenges may have provided the selective pressure that drove the final phases of human cognitive evolution. The ability to adapt rapidly to changing environmental conditions became a hallmark of early Homo sapiens. Unlike earlier hominin species that were often restricted to specific environments, our early ancestors demonstrated remarkable flexibility in their habitat preferences and subsistence strategies. This adaptability would prove crucial when they eventually began expanding beyond Africa. Regional variations within early Homo sapiens populations provide insights into the cultural diversity that was already beginning to characterize our species. Different populations developed distinct tool traditions, artistic styles, and possibly even variations in social organization. This cultural diversity would become increasingly important as human populations spread across the globe. The development of more sophisticated fire control during this period had profound implications for human society and culture. Beyond basic warmth and cooking, fire was being used for tool manufacture, landscape modification, and possibly even ritualistic purposes. The social aspects of fire use, gathering around hearths, sharing stories, and coordinating group activities, may have played crucial roles in the development of complex human cultures. Evidence for long-distance trade and resource exchange appears during this period, suggesting that early Homo sapiens were developing economic relationships that extended far beyond their immediate groups. The presence of materials from distant sources at archaeological sites indicates either extensive travel or sophisticated trading networks that required new forms of social cooperation and trust. The treatment of the dead during this period reveals growing sophistication in symbolic thinking and possibly religious beliefs. While clear evidence for elaborate burial practices doesn't appear until later, some early Homo sapiens sites show evidence of deliberate disposal of bodies and possibly even early forms of grave goods. As we examine the emergence of modern humans, we see the final assembly of the cognitive and cultural toolkit that would enable our species to transform the world. The combination of enhanced brain function, sophisticated technology, complex social organization, and symbolic thinking created a behavioral modernity that set the stage for all subsequent human achievement. The early Homo sapiens of Africa were, in many ways, still living lives that would have been recognizable to their hominin predecessors. They were hunters and gatherers, living in small groups and surviving through intimate knowledge of their local environments. Yet they possessed cognitive capabilities that would soon explode into the full flowering of human culture, technology, and civilization. The stage was set for the most remarkable expansion in the history of life on Earth. These early modern humans, armed with unprecedented cognitive abilities and increasingly sophisticated technologies, were about to embark on a journey that would take them to every corner of the globe and ultimately beyond the Earth itself. Chapter 8. The Great Awakening. Between 70,000 and 40,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened to our species. After nearly 200,000 years of relatively gradual development, human culture exploded in a burst of creativity and innovation that archaeologists call the Upper Paleolithic Revolution or the Great Leap Forward. This period witnessed the emergence of sophisticated art, complex technology, elaborate burial practices, and symbolic behaviors that marked the full flowering of modern human consciousness. The transformation was so dramatic and sudden that it seems almost magical in the archaeological record. Sites that had previously yielded simple stone tools and basic evidence of human habitation suddenly burst with evidence of artistic expression, technological innovation, and symbolic behavior. It was as if a switch had been flipped in the human mind, unleashing creative potential that had been building for thousands of generations. The cave paintings of Europe provide the most spectacular evidence of this cognitive revolution. At sites like Chauvet, Lascaux, and Altamira, our ancestors created artistic masterpieces that rival anything produced in the modern era. These weren't crude stick figures or simple handprints, but sophisticated depictions of animals, humans, and abstract symbols that demonstrate remarkable artistic skill and aesthetic sensibility. The technical mastery displayed in these cave paintings is breathtaking. Artists used the natural contours of cave walls to create three-dimensional effects, employed multiple colors and shading techniques, and demonstrated detailed knowledge of animal anatomy and behavior. Some paintings show evidence of being planned and executed over extended periods, with different artists contributing to complex compositions that tell elaborate stories. But cave art was just one manifestation of the creative explosion that characterized this period. Humans were also creating portable art objects, carved figurines, decorated tools, and ornamental jewelry that demonstrate the emergence of aesthetic sensibilities and symbolic thinking. The famous Venus figurines, found at sites across Europe, represent some of the earliest known sculptures and provide insights into early human concepts of beauty, fertility, and possibly religious beliefs. The technology of this period underwent equally dramatic developments. Instead of the simple general-purpose tools that had characterized earlier human cultures, people were now creating specialized implements designed for specific tasks. Sophisticated spear throwers increased hunting efficiency. Carved harpoons enabled the exploitation of aquatic resources, and composite tools combined multiple materials to create implements far more effective than anything made from single materials. The innovation in tool-making techniques was remarkable. Humans developed methods for heat-treating stone to improve its knapping properties, created pressure-flaking techniques that allowed for incredibly precise tool manufacture, and began working with new materials like bone, antler, and ivory to create implements that would have been impossible to make from stone alone. Musical instruments from this period provide evidence for the development of complex auditory cultures. Bone flutes from sites in Germany date to over 40,000 years ago, representing some of the earliest known musical instruments. These sophisticated devices, carved from bird bones and mammoth ivory, demonstrate not only technical skill, but also the emergence of aesthetic appreciation for sound and rhythm. The burial practices of this period reveal sophisticated concepts of death, afterlife, and social identity. Bodies were interred with elaborate grave goods, including tools, ornaments, and food offerings that suggest beliefs about continued existence after death. Some burials show evidence of complex rituals involving the use of ochre, the placement of bodies in specific positions, and the inclusion of symbolic objects that may have had religious or spiritual significance. The social organization of human groups underwent fundamental changes during this period. Evidence suggests that group sizes were increasing and that different groups were maintaining contact over vast distances. Similar artistic styles and tool traditions appear at sites separated by hundreds or thousands of miles, indicating either migration or cultural exchange networks that span continents. Trade networks of unprecedented complexity emerged during this period. Materials like high-quality stone, shells, and amber were transported over enormous distances, sometimes traveling hundreds of miles from their sources. This long-distance exchange required sophisticated social mechanisms for maintaining relationships, negotiating agreements, and ensuring fair exchanges between groups that might have spoken different languages and followed different customs. The exploitation of new environments and resources accelerated dramatically during this period. Humans began systematically hunting marine mammals, fishing in deep waters, and exploiting high-altitude environments that had previously been uninhabitable. This expansion into new ecological niches required technological innovations, cultural adaptations, and possibly even physiological changes that enabled survival in challenging environments. Language almost certainly underwent crucial developments. During this period, though direct evidence for speech remains elusive in the archaeological record. However, the level of cultural complexity and symbolic behavior evident in the archaeological record strongly suggests that fully modern language capabilities had emerged. The coordination required for complex hunting strategies, the transmission of artistic techniques, and the maintenance of far-flung social networks would have been impossible without sophisticated communication systems. The emergence of what appears to be ritual behavior during this period provides insights into the development of spiritual and religious thinking. Cave sites show evidence of repeated visits for purposes that seem to go beyond simple shelter or practical activities. Some caves contain evidence of elaborate ceremonies involving music, art creation, and possibly even altered states of consciousness achieved through various means. The treatment of animals during this period reveals complex relationships that went beyond simple predator-prey dynamics. Some cave paintings show animals in contexts that suggest they were viewed as spiritual beings or symbols rather than merely food sources. The careful attention to anatomical detail and behavioral accuracy in animal depictions suggests intimate knowledge that may have had spiritual as well as practical dimensions. Evidence for counting and possibly even early mathematical concepts appears during this period. Notched bones from various sites show regular patterns that may represent counting systems or calendrical observations. These artifacts suggest that humans were beginning to think abstractly about quantities, time, and mathematical relationships. The innovations of this period weren't limited to technology and art. Evidence suggests that humans were also developing new approaches to resource management, territorial organization, and conflict resolution. The ability to maintain complex social relationships over large areas and extended time periods required new forms of diplomacy, negotiation, and cultural regulation. As we examine this remarkable period in human history, we see the emergence of behaviors and capabilities that remain fundamental to human culture today. The artistic traditions established during the Upper Paleolithic continue to influence human aesthetic sensibilities. The technological innovations of this period laid the groundwork for all subsequent technological development. The social and economic systems that emerged during this time provided the foundation for the complex societies that would eventually give rise to civilization itself. The Great Awakening represents the moment when humans truly became human in the fullest sense. All the potential that had been building over millions of years of evolution suddenly burst forth in an explosion of creativity and innovation that transformed our species and set the stage for everything that would follow. The humans who lived through this remarkable period weren't just surviving. They were creating meaning, beauty, and complexity in ways that had never existed before in the history of life on Earth. Chapter 9. The global Conquest. 70,000 years ago, a small group of modern humans stood on the shores of the Red Sea, gazing across the narrow strait that separated Africa from the Arabian Peninsula. These weren't the first humans to leave Africa. That distinction belongs to Homo erectus nearly 2 million years earlier. But this migration would prove to be the most consequential journey in human history, marking the beginning of our species' conquest of the entire planet. Unlike the gradual expansion of earlier human species, the spread of Homo sapiens around the globe was remarkably rapid and comprehensive. Within just 60,000 years, humans had reached Australia, penetrated deep into Asia, colonized Europe, and even crossed the treacherous waters of the Pacific to settle remote islands. This explosive expansion demonstrates the unprecedented adaptability and innovative capacity that characterized our species. The initial migration out of Africa was likely driven by a combination of factors: climate change that made parts of Africa less hospitable, growing populations that exceeded the carrying capacity of local environments, and perhaps simply the restless curiosity that has always characterized human behavior. Whatever the motivation, the small groups that made this initial journey carried with them the genetic diversity that would eventually populate the entire world. The route taken by these early migrants remains a subject of intense research and debate. Most evidence suggests that the primary pathway led across the Red Sea into the Arabian Peninsula, then eastward along the coastlines of the Indian Ocean. This southern route would have provided access to marine resources and relatively stable environments during a period when much of the interior of Asia was experiencing harsh glacial conditions. The speed of human expansion across Asia was breathtaking. Archaeological evidence suggests that humans reached Australia by 65,000 years ago. a journey that required sophisticated boat-building technology and remarkable navigational skills. The crossing from Southeast Asia to Australia, even at the lowest sea levels, required multiple water crossings, totaling over 60 miles of open ocean. The colonization of Australia represents one of the most remarkable achievements in human prehistory. The first Australians encountered a continent filled with unique flora and fauna that had evolved in isolation for millions of years. Giant marsupials, massive reptiles, and flightless birds dominated ecosystems unlike anything found elsewhere on Earth. The rapid extinction of many of these large animals shortly after human arrival suggests that our ancestors had a dramatic impact on Australian ecosystems from the very beginning. The adaptation to Australian environments required unprecedented innovation and flexibility. Humans had to learn to exploit entirely new food sources, develop appropriate technologies for unfamiliar landscapes, and create cultural practices suited to the unique challenges of the Australian continent. The Aboriginal Australians who resulted from this process developed some of the most sophisticated hunter-gatherer cultures ever documented, with complex social systems, rich artistic traditions, and sustainable land management practices. The expansion into Europe occurred somewhat later, around 45,000 years ago, and involved different challenges and opportunities. Europe was already occupied by Neanderthals, creating competitive pressures that may have accelerated cultural and technological innovation among the incoming modern humans. The European environment was also dramatically different from the African homeland, requiring adaptations to cold climates, seasonal variation, and different prey species. The meeting between modern humans and Neanderthals in Europe was one of the most significant encounters in human history. For several thousand years, these two human species coexisted, competed, and sometimes interbred. The ultimate replacement of Neanderthals by modern humans involved complex processes that researchers are still working to understand. The colonization of northern Asia presented its own unique challenges. Humans reaching Siberia had to adapt to some of the harshest environments ever inhabited by our species. Winter temperatures of -60 degrees Fahrenheit, months of darkness, and limited food resources tested human adaptability to its limits. The successful colonization of these extreme environments demonstrates the remarkable flexibility of human technology and culture. The development of cold weather adaptations in northern populations involved both cultural and biological innovations. Sophisticated clothing made from animal furs, the construction of insulated shelters, and the development of technologies for hunting Arctic animals all played crucial roles in enabling human survival in these challenging environments. Some populations also developed biological adaptations, including changes in body proportions and metabolic efficiency that improved cold tolerance. The most spectacular human migration was the colonization of the Americas, which occurred sometime between 25,000 and 15,000 years ago. This journey required crossing the Bering Land Bridge during glacial periods when sea levels were low enough to expose dry land between Asia and North America. The first Americans then had to navigate through or around massive ice sheets that covered much of northern North America. Once in the Americas, human expansion was remarkably rapid. Archaeological evidence suggests that humans reached the southern tip of South America within just a few thousand years of their initial arrival in North America. This expansion required adaptation to an incredible diversity of environments, from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests, from high-altitude mountains to coastal deserts. The colonization of the Pacific Islands represents perhaps the most remarkable navigational achievement in human history. Beginning around 3,000 years ago, Polynesian navigators began spreading across the vast Pacific Ocean, eventually reaching islands separated by thousands of miles of open water. using only traditional sailing technologies and sophisticated knowledge of ocean currents, weather patterns, and celestial navigation. These seafarers successfully colonized islands as remote as Easter Island and Hawaii. The global expansion of modern humans had profound implications for the planet's ecosystems. Wherever humans arrived, significant changes followed. Large animals that had never encountered human predators often went extinct within a few thousand years of human arrival. Landscapes were modified through burning, hunting, and resource extraction. In many cases, human arrival marked the beginning of the Anthropocene, the geological epoch, dominated by human influence. The genetic legacy of human migration can still be read in the DNA of modern populations. As small groups of migrants spread across the globe, they carried with them only subsets of the genetic diversity present in African populations. This founder effect resulted in the pattern of decreasing genetic diversity with distance from Africa that characterizes modern human populations. Cultural diversity exploded as human populations adapted to different environments around the globe. Each new environment presented unique challenges and opportunities that drove the development of distinctive technologies, social systems, and cultural practices. The result was an unprecedented level of cultural diversity that enriched human experience and created the foundation for all subsequent cultural development. The success of human global expansion was built on characteristics that had been developing throughout our evolutionary history: behavioral flexibility, technological innovation, social cooperation, and cultural learning. But the scale and speed of our species' expansion around the globe represented something entirely new in the history of life on Earth. By 10,000 years ago, humans had successfully colonized every habitable continent and many oceanic islands. No other large mammal had ever achieved such a global distribution. This remarkable expansion set the stage for the next phase of human development, the transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture and the eventual rise of civilization. The global conquest of Homo sapiens represents one of the most remarkable achievements in the history of life on Earth. In just 60,000 years, our species had spread from a small African homeland to every corner of the globe, adapting to environments ranging from tropical deserts to Arctic tundra. This expansion demonstrated the unprecedented flexibility and innovative capacity that would continue to characterize human development throughout history. Chapter 10. The agricultural Arrivio in 10,000 years ago. In river valleys and hillsides across the globe, humans began one of the most transformative experiments in our species' history. After millions of years of hunting and gathering, small groups of people started deliberately planting seeds, tending crops, and domesticating animals. This agricultural revolution would fundamentally alter human society, population dynamics, and our relationship with the natural world in ways that continue to shape our lives today. The transition to agriculture wasn't a single event, but rather a gradual process that occurred independently in multiple locations around the world. In the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, people began cultivating wheat and barley while domesticating sheep, goats, and cattle. In China, rice and millet became the foundation crops, supplemented by pigs and chickens. In Mesoamerica, corn, beans, and squash formed the agricultural trinity that would sustain complex civilizations for thousands of years. The development of agriculture represented a fundamental shift in human relationships with the environment. Instead of adapting to existing ecosystems, humans began actively modifying landscapes to suit their needs. Forests were cleared for farmland, wetlands were drained for crop production, and wild grasslands were converted to managed pastures. For the first time in Earth's history, a single species was deliberately reshaping entire ecosystems on a global scale. The motivations behind the agricultural transition remain a subject of intense debate among researchers. Climate change at the end of the last ice age may have made wild food sources less reliable, forcing people to experiment with more predictable alternatives. Growing populations might have exceeded the carrying capacity of hunter-gatherer lifestyles, creating pressure to develop more intensive food production methods. Some researchers suggest that the development of complex social hierarchies and ceremonial activities created demands for surplus food that could only be met through agriculture. The process of plant and animal domestication involved remarkable feats of biological manipulation that early farmers accomplished through careful observation and selective breeding. Wild grasses with tiny, scattered seeds were gradually transformed into crops with large, concentrated grains that ripened simultaneously and remained attached to the plant until harvest. Wild animals were selectively bred for docility, reproductive control, and useful characteristics, like milk production or wool growth. The domestication of wheat provides a compelling example of this process. Wild wheat shatters when ripe, scattering its seeds across the landscape for natural dispersal. Early farmers selectively saved seeds from plants that held their grains longer, gradually developing varieties that retained their seeds until harvest. This simple selection process, repeated over many generations, fundamentally altered the plant's reproductive strategy and created the foundation for settled agricultural life. The social implications of agriculture were profound and far-reaching. For the first time in human history, people could produce more food than they needed for immediate survival. This surplus made possible the development of social specialization, with some individuals able to devote their time to activities other than food production. Craftspeople, religious leaders, warriors, and administrators emerged as distinct social classes, creating the foundation for complex, hierarchical societies. The development of permanent settlements was another crucial consequence of agricultural adoption. Hunter-gatherer groups had necessarily been mobile, following seasonal resources and avoiding the depletion of local environments. Agricultural societies, by contrast, were tied to their fields and could support much larger populations. In smaller areas, villages, towns, and eventually cities became possible for the first time in human history. The agricultural lifestyle also transformed human relationships with time and planning. Hunter-gatherers lived primarily in the present, responding to immediate opportunities and challenges. Farmers, by contrast, had to think in terms of seasons and cycles, planning months ahead for planting, tending, and harvesting crops. This shift toward long-term thinking had profound implications for human psychology and social organization. Population growth accelerated dramatically with the adoption of agriculture. Agricultural societies could support population densities 10 to 100 times greater than hunter-gatherer groups. This population growth provided larger labor forces for agricultural production, creating positive feedback loops that encouraged further agricultural intensification and settlement expansion. The domestication of animals added another dimension to agricultural societies. Cattle, horses, sheep, and other domestic animals provided not just food, but also labor, transportation, and raw materials for clothing and tools. The management of domestic animals required new forms of knowledge and social organization, creating pastoral societies that supplemented or replaced crop-based agriculture in many regions. Trade and exchange became increasingly important as agricultural societies developed. Different regions specialized in different crops and products, creating interdependencies that required complex trading networks. Surplus food could be exchanged for raw materials, manufactured goods, and luxury items, fostering the development of markets and monetary systems. The development of food storage and preservation technologies was crucial for agricultural success. Granaries, pottery, and other storage systems allowed communities to survive seasonal variations in food availability. and provided security against crop failures. The ability to store large quantities of food also enabled the support of non-food producing specialists and the accumulation of wealth and power. Social inequality emerged as a significant feature of agricultural societies. The ability to produce and control food surpluses created opportunities for some individuals and families to accumulate wealth and power at the expense of others. Private property concepts developed around land ownership, leading to social stratification that was largely unknown in hunter-gatherer societies. The religious and spiritual implications of agriculture were equally significant. The seasonal cycles of planting and harvest became central to religious observances and cultural identity. Fertility deities, harvest festivals, and agricultural rituals emerged as important elements of human spiritual life. The relationship between humans and nature was fundamentally altered as people began to see themselves as managers and controllers of natural processes rather than simply participants in them. Women's roles in society underwent significant changes with the adoption of agriculture. In many hunter-gatherer societies, women had relatively high status due to their crucial roles in food gathering and plant knowledge. In agricultural societies, women's status often declined as men took control of the heavy labor associated with field preparation and the management of large domestic animals. The development of agricultural tools and technologies required new forms of innovation and craftsmanship. Plows, sickles, grinding stones, and irrigation systems demanded sophisticated understanding of materials, mechanics, and engineering principles. The need for increasingly complex tools drove technological development that would eventually lead to metallurgy and other advanced technologies. Warfare and conflict became more common and intense. With the development of agricultural societies, sedentary populations with stored wealth became attractive targets for raids and conquest. The need to defend agricultural settlements and resources led to the development of fortifications, standing armies, and organized military technologies. The agricultural revolution also had significant health implications for human populations. While agriculture allowed for larger populations and more predictable food supplies, it also created new health challenges. Reliance on a limited number of crop species reduced dietary diversity and increased the risk of malnutrition. Close contact with domestic animals facilitated the transmission of diseases between humans and animals. Settled populations faced new sanitation challenges that hunter-gatherer groups had avoided through mobility. The environmental consequences of early agriculture were substantial and continue to influence global ecosystems today. Deforestation for farmland, soil erosion from intensive cultivation, and the extinction of wild species due to habitat conversion all began during this period. Humans were beginning to alter global biogeochemical cycles and ecosystem functioning in ways that would have lasting consequences. As we examine the agricultural revolution, we see the emergence of many characteristics that define modern human civilization: complex social hierarchies, technological innovation, environmental manipulation, and the accumulation of wealth and power. The transition to agriculture represented a point of no return in human development, setting our species on a trajectory that would eventually lead to industrialization, urbanization, and global civilization. The success of agriculture was so complete that today over 99% of humans depend on agricultural food production for survival. The hunter-gatherer lifestyle that sustained our species for millions of years has been almost entirely replaced by agricultural and industrial systems. This transformation represents one of the most dramatic behavioral shifts in the history of any species. Chapter 11. The Rise of Civilization 5,000 years ago. Along the fertile banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in ancient Mesopotamia, humanity took another monumental step forward in its evolutionary journey. The scattered agricultural villages that had emerged after the agricultural revolution were beginning to coalesce into something entirely new: the world's first cities. This urban revolution would prove to be as transformative as the development of agriculture itself, setting the stage for the complex civilizations that would define human society for millennia to come. The transition from village to city wasn't simply a matter of more people living in closer proximity. It represented a fundamental reorganization of human society that required new forms of social organization, technological innovation, and cultural development. Cities created concentrations of population that allowed for unprecedented levels of specialization, trade, and cultural exchange. Uruk, often considered the world's first true city, emerged around 4000 BCE in what is now southern Iraq. At its height, Uruk housed over 50,000 people within its walls, a population density that would have been unimaginable to earlier human societies. The city's massive walls, elaborate temples, and complex irrigation systems represented engineering achievements that required coordinated labor from thousands of workers over many years, the social organization necessary to build and maintain. These early cities required innovations in leadership, administration, and resource management. For the first time in human history, some individuals gained the power to direct the labor of thousands of others. Kings, priests, and administrators emerged as a ruling class that controlled both spiritual and temporal authority. The development of writing systems was perhaps the most revolutionary innovation of early urban civilizations. Initially developed for record-keeping and administrative purposes, writing allowed for the preservation and transmission of knowledge in ways that had never been possible before. The cuneiform script of Mesopotamia, the hieroglyphs of Egypt, and the characters of ancient China all emerged independently, demonstrating the fundamental importance of written communication for complex societies. Writing transformed human culture in profound ways. For the first time, knowledge could be preserved exactly across generations without the distortions inherent in oral transmission. Laws could be codified and enforced consistently. Historical events could be recorded and remembered. Literature, philosophy, and science became possible as distinct intellectual pursuits. The Code of Hammurabi, carved in stone around 1750 BCE, represents one of the earliest examples of written law. This comprehensive legal code addressed everything from property rights to family relationships to criminal justice, demonstrating the complexity of social relationships that had emerged in urban societies. The very existence of such detailed legal codes reveals how far human society had evolved from the small, kinship-based groups of our ancestors. Trade networks expanded dramatically with the rise of cities. Urban populations couldn't produce all the resources they needed locally, creating demand for goods from distant regions. Merchants traveled hundreds or thousands of miles to trade metals, precious stones, exotic foods, and manufactured goods. These trading relationships created the first truly international economic systems. The development of monetary systems facilitated increasingly complex economic relationships. Instead of bartering goods directly, people could use standardized units of value, initially measured weights of precious metals, later coined money, to facilitate exchanges. This innovation allowed for much more sophisticated economic calculations and planning. Technological innovation accelerated dramatically in urban environments. The concentration of specialists and the accumulation of wealth allowed for investments in research and development that would have been impossible in smaller communities. Metallurgy advanced from simple copper working to sophisticated bronze and later iron production. Architecture evolved from simple post and beam construction to complex engineering projects involving arches, domes, and massive stone construction. The wheel, invented around 3500 BCE in Mesopotamia, revolutionized transportation and manufacturing. Initially used for pottery production, the wheel was quickly adapted for vehicles, dramatically improving the efficiency of trade and warfare. The potter's wheel also enabled the mass production of standardized pottery, representing one of the first examples of industrial-scale manufacturing. Religious and philosophical thinking underwent profound development in urban civilizations. The concentration of population and resources allowed for the support of full-time priests, scholars, and philosophers who could devote themselves entirely to intellectual pursuits. Elaborate temples became centers not just of worship but of learning, housing libraries, schools, and observatories. The epic literature that emerged from early civilizations reveals sophisticated thinking about human nature, morality, and the meaning of existence. The Epic of Gilgamesh, composed in ancient Mesopotamia, explores themes of friendship, mortality, and the search for meaning that remain relevant to human experience today. These early literary works demonstrate cognitive and emotional sophistication that equals anything produced in later periods. Mathematics and astronomy reached new levels of sophistication in early urban civilizations. The Babylonians developed sophisticated mathematical systems, including place value notation and methods for solving complex equations. Egyptian engineers used advanced geometric principles to construct the pyramids with extraordinary precision. Chinese astronomers created accurate calendars and predicted eclipses with remarkable accuracy. The development of formal education systems was another crucial innovation of early civilizations. Schools emerged to train scribes, priests, and administrators in the complex knowledge required for urban society. These educational institutions created the first systematic approaches to knowledge transmission and intellectual development. Warfare also became more sophisticated and destructive with the rise of civilizations. The wealth and resources concentrated in cities made them attractive targets for conquest, while the same organizational capabilities that built cities could be applied to raising and equipping armies. Professional soldiers, fortifications, and siege warfare all emerged as responses to the military challenges of urban civilization. The environmental impact of early civilizations was substantial and foreshadowed the global environmental challenges that humanity faces today. Deforestation, soil depletion, and water pollution all resulted from the intensive resource use required to support large urban populations. Some civilizations, like the ancient Maya, may have collapsed partly due to environmental degradation caused by unsustainable resource use. Social stratification became increasingly pronounced in urban civilizations. The egalitarian social structures that had characterized hunter-gatherer societies were replaced by rigid class systems that divided society into rulers, priests, warriors, merchants, craftspeople, farmers, and slaves. These social hierarchies often persisted for thousands of years, shaping the life experiences of countless generations. The role of women in society underwent significant changes with urbanization. In many early civilizations, women's status declined as they were excluded from formal political and economic power. However, some civilizations, particularly those with female deities, maintained relatively high status for women. The diversity of gender roles across different civilizations demonstrates the cultural rather than biological nature of many gender distinctions. Art and architecture reached unprecedented levels of sophistication in early civilizations. The pyramids of Egypt, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, and the palaces of ancient Persia all represent massive investments of resources and extraordinary artistic vision. These monuments serve not just practical purposes, but also symbolic ones, demonstrating the power and cultural achievements of their builders. The development of mechanical technologies in early civilizations laid the groundwork for all subsequent technological development. Water wheels, pulleys, levers, and gears all emerged during this period, providing the basic mechanical principles that would eventually lead to the Industrial Revolution thousands of years later. International diplomacy emerged as civilizations came into contact with each other. Treaties, alliances, and formal diplomatic protocols developed to manage relationships between different cities and kingdoms. The Amarna letters from ancient Egypt provide fascinating insights into the sophisticated diplomatic relationships that existed between ancient powers. The concept of empire emerged as successful civilizations expanded their control over larger territories and populations. The Akkadian Empire, established around 2300 BCE, is often considered the world's first multi-ethnic empire. The challenges of governing diverse populations over vast distances required new forms of administration and cultural integration. Legal systems became increasingly sophisticated as civilizations grappled with the complexities of urban life. Concepts of property rights, contracts, and criminal justice all developed during this period. The principle that laws should apply equally to all citizens, regardless of social status, emerged as a revolutionary idea that would eventually transform human society. The preservation of knowledge through libraries and archives became a priority for advanced civilizations. The Library of Alexandria, though built later, represents the culmination of this trend towards systematic knowledge preservation. These early libraries served as repositories for human learning and centers for scholarly research. As we examine the rise of civilization, we see the emergence of institutions and ideas that continue to shape human society today. Cities, governments, legal systems, educational institutions, and complex economic networks all trace their origins to innovations made during this crucial period in human development. The urban revolution represents another quantum leap in human social organization, comparable to the development of language or the adoption of agriculture. The cities that emerged 5,000 years ago created new possibilities for human cooperation, creativity, and cultural development that continue to drive human progress today. Chapter 12. The acceleration of technology as human civilizations matured and expanded across the globe. Something extraordinary began to happen to the pace of human knowledge accumulation. What had once taken millennia to achieve could now be accomplished in centuries or even decades. The cumulative nature of human learning, combined with increasingly sophisticated methods of knowledge preservation and transmission, created an acceleration effect that would transform human capability at an unprecedented rate. The ancient Greeks, building upon the foundations laid by earlier civilizations, made revolutionary contributions to human understanding of the natural world and our place within it. Beginning around 800 BCE, Greek philosophers and scientists began developing systematic approaches to understanding reality that would influence human thinking for thousands of years. Thales of Miletus, often considered the first philosopher, proposed that natural phenomena could be explained through reason and observation rather than solely through religious or mythological frameworks. This shift toward rational inquiry marked a crucial turning point in human intellectual development, establishing the foundations for scientific thinking. The democratic experiment in Athens created new forms of political organization that recognized the potential for ordinary citizens to participate in governance. While limited to free male citizens, Athenian democracy established principles of popular sovereignty and individual rights that would eventually expand to encompass all of humanity. Greek mathematics reached extraordinary levels of sophistication, with figures like Euclid developing geometric principles that remain fundamental to mathematical thinking today. The Pythagorean theorem, the calculation of pi, and the development of formal logical proofs all emerged from Greek mathematical thinking. Aristotle's systematic approach to categorizing and understanding natural phenomena created the foundations for biological and physical sciences. His careful observations and logical analysis methods, while not always accurate by modern standards, established methodological approaches that would guide scientific inquiry for over 2,000 years. The Roman Empire's greatest contribution to human development may have been its legal and administrative systems. Roman law established principles of jurisprudence that continue to influence legal systems worldwide. The concept that laws should be written, public, and applied equally to all citizens represented a revolutionary advance in social organization. Roman engineering achievements demonstrated humanity's growing mastery over the physical environment. Aqueducts, roads, bridges, and massive architectural projects like the Colosseum showcased technical capabilities that wouldn't be matched in Europe for over 1,000 years after the empire's fall. The Silk Road trade networks that connected Europe, Asia, and Africa facilitated not just economic exchange, but also the transmission of ideas, technologies, and cultural practices across vast distances. Innovations developed in one region could now spread across continents, accelerating technological and cultural development worldwide. The emergence of major world religions during this period provided new frameworks for understanding human existence and moral behavior. Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam all developed sophisticated philosophical and ethical systems that would influence billions of people over subsequent millennia. The Islamic Golden Age, spanning roughly from the 8th to the 13th centuries, witnessed extraordinary advances in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. Islamic scholars preserved and expanded upon Greek learning, while making original contributions that would prove crucial for later European development. The invention of algebra by Islamic mathematicians revolutionized mathematical thinking, providing tools for solving complex problems that had been impossible to address with earlier methods. The preservation and translation of ancient texts in Islamic libraries ensured that crucial knowledge survived the European Dark Ages. Chinese innovations during this period included papermaking, printing, gunpowder, and the magnetic compass. Technologies that would eventually transform global civilization. The Chinese examination system for selecting government officials based on merit rather than birth represented another revolutionary advance in social organization. The European Renaissance marked a dramatic acceleration in the pace of intellectual and artistic development. The rediscovery of classical learning, combined with new empirical approaches to understanding nature, created an explosion of creativity and innovation that would reshape European society. The printing press, invented by Gutenberg around 1450, democratized access to knowledge in ways that paralleled the impact of writing itself. Books became widely available for the first time, allowing ideas to spread rapidly across large populations and enabling the preservation of knowledge on an unprecedented scale. The scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries established systematic methods for understanding the natural world through observation, experimentation, and mathematical analysis. Figures like Galileo, Newton, and Kepler developed approaches to scientific inquiry that would accelerate human understanding of everything from planetary motion to the fundamental laws of physics. The age of exploration brought different human populations into contact on a global scale for the first time in history. While often devastating for indigenous populations, these encounters also facilitated the exchange of crops, animals, technologies, and ideas that would transform societies worldwide. The Enlightenment of the 18th century applied scientific reasoning to questions of human society, politics, and ethics. Concepts of individual rights, democratic governance, and social progress emerged as intellectual frameworks that would guide human political development for centuries to come. The Industrial Revolution of the 18th and 19th centuries marked another quantum leap in human capability. The harnessing of steam power, the development of mechanized production, and the growth of factory systems transformed economic relationships and social structures in ways that continue to influence human society today. The development of electricity and electromagnetic technologies in the 19th century opened entirely new realms of human capability. Telegraph, telephone, and radio communications collapsed distances and enabled real-time coordination across vast geographical areas. The 20th century witnessed an explosion of scientific and technological advancement that dwarfed all previous human achievement. The discovery of atomic structure, the development of quantum mechanics, the understanding of genetics, and the exploration of space all expanded human knowledge in ways that would have seemed impossible to earlier generations. The development of computers and digital technologies in the latter half of the 20th century created new possibilities for information processing, storage, and transmission that are transforming every aspect of human society. The Internet has created a global network of human knowledge and communication that enables collaboration on scales never before possible. Medical advances during the 20th century dramatically extended human lifespan and quality of life. The development of antibiotics, vaccines, surgical techniques, and diagnostic technologies has reduced human suffering and expanded human potential in ways that previous generations could never have imagined. The mapping of the human genome represents a revolutionary achievement in understanding our own biological nature. For the first time in human history, we can read the complete genetic instructions that guide human development and begin to understand the molecular basis of human traits and capabilities. Climate science has revealed the global impact of human activities on Earth's environmental systems, creating both challenges and opportunities for conscious environmental management. For the first time in human history, we have the knowledge and tools necessary to deliberately manage our relationship with the global environment. Space exploration has extended human presence beyond Earth for the first time in our species' history. The images of Earth from space have provided new perspectives on our planet's unity and fragility. While the technical achievements of space programs have demonstrated humanity's potential for overcoming seemingly impossible challenges, the acceleration of knowledge accumulation shows no signs of slowing down. Current developments in artificial intelligence, biotechnology, nanotechnology, and quantum computing promise to transform human capabilities in ways that may rival any previous technological revolution. The challenge facing contemporary humanity is not a lack of knowledge or capability, but rather the wisdom to use our unprecedented powers responsibly. The same technologies that enable remarkable achievements also create risks that could threaten human survival and well-being. As we trace the acceleration of human knowledge from ancient civilizations to the present day, we see a consistent pattern of building upon previous achievements to create new possibilities for human development. Each generation has inherited the accumulated wisdom of its predecessors and added its own contributions to the growing edifice of human understanding. Epilogue: the continuing journey as our extraordinary journey through 7 million years of human evolution reaches its conclusion. We find ourselves standing at a remarkable vantage point in the story of our species. From those first upright steps taken by our earliest ancestors in the forests of ancient Africa to the complex global civilization that surrounds us today, the human story represents one of the most dramatic transformations in the history of life on Earth. Today, over 8 billion humans inhabit virtually every corner of our planet. We have built cities that house millions of people, created technologies that would seem like magic to our ancestors, and developed cultural achievements that span the full range of human creativity and imagination. We have split the atom, composed symphonies, painted masterpieces, and even ventured beyond our home planet to explore the cosmos. Yet in many fundamental ways, we remain the same species that emerged in Africa 300,000 years ago. Our brains are essentially unchanged from those of our Paleolithic ancestors. Our basic emotional and social needs remain rooted in the small group dynamics that characterized human societies for most of our evolutionary history. The drives for survival, reproduction, social connection, and meaning that motivated our ancestors continue to shape human behavior today. The remarkable journey we've traced reveals several crucial insights about human nature and our place in the world. First, it demonstrates the incredible power of cultural evolution to supplement and sometimes override biological evolution. While our bodies and brains haven't changed significantly in hundreds of thousands of years, our cultures have undergone continuous transformation, allowing us to adapt to new environments and challenges with unprecedented speed and flexibility. Second, our evolutionary history reveals that cooperation and social learning have been the keys to human success. Every major advancement in human development, from the first stone tools to the development of agriculture to the rise of civilization, has depended on our ability to work together, share knowledge, and build upon the achievements of previous generations. Third, the human story shows that innovation and adaptability are fundamental characteristics of our species. Time and again, when faced with environmental challenges, resource scarcity, or competitive pressures, humans have responded with technological and cultural innovations that not only solved immediate problems, but often opened up entirely new possibilities for development. The study of human evolution also reveals the contingent nature of our existence. At countless points along our evolutionary journey, our lineage could have gone extinct like so many others. Climate changes, volcanic eruptions, disease outbreaks, and competition with other species all posed existential threats to our ancestors. The fact that we're here today to tell this story is the result of countless fortunate circumstances, successful adaptations, and chance events that could easily have turned out differently. Our evolutionary heritage has profound implications for understanding contemporary human behavior and the challenges we face as a species. Many of the behaviors that served our ancestors well in small hunter-gatherer groups, including tendencies toward in-group loyalty, suspicion of outsiders, and short-term thinking, can create problems in our modern interconnected world. The rapid pace of cultural and technological change in recent centuries has created a mismatch between our evolved psychology and our current environment. We live in a world of global communications, international commerce, and planet-scale environmental challenges. Yet our brains are still wired for life in small groups where everyone knew everyone else, and the most distant threat might be the neighboring tribe over the hill. Understanding our evolutionary history can help us navigate these challenges more effectively. By recognizing the deep evolutionary roots of human behavior, we can better understand why certain problems persist and develop more effective solutions. For example, our tendency to respond more strongly to immediate, visible threats than to distant, abstract ones helps explain why climate change has been such a difficult problem to address despite overwhelming scientific evidence. The human capacity for cultural learning and innovation that has driven our success throughout evolutionary history continues to be our greatest asset in facing contemporary challenges. Just as our ancestors developed new technologies and social systems to adapt to changing environments, we have the potential to develop solutions to modern problems like climate change, resource depletion, and global inequality. The story of human evolution also provides perspective on our relationship with other species and the natural world. For most of our evolutionary history, humans were just one of many primate species struggling to survive in competitive ecosystems. Our current dominance of global ecosystems is a very recent development that carries with it unprecedented responsibilities. The extinction of our hominin relatives, the Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other human species that once shared the planet with us, serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly successful lineages can disappear. As the only surviving human species, we carry the responsibility not just for our own future, but for preserving the legacy of millions of years of human evolution. Our exploration of human origins reveals that diversity has always been a strength of our lineage. The genetic, cultural, and behavioral diversity that characterizes modern human populations reflects millions of years of adaptation to different environments and challenges. This diversity represents a vast repository of human potential and resilience that will be crucial for navigating future challenges. The technological capabilities that humans have developed, particularly in recent centuries, have given us powers that no species in Earth's history has ever possessed. We can now influence global climate patterns, cause mass extinctions, and even potentially destroy all complex life on Earth. With these unprecedented powers comes the responsibility to use them wisely. Yet the same innovative capacity that has created these challenges also provides hope for solutions. Human ingenuity has repeatedly found ways to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. From the development of agriculture to the Industrial Revolution to the Information Age, humans have consistently surprised themselves with their ability to create new possibilities and expand the boundaries of what's achievable. The study of human evolution also reveals that our species has an extraordinary capacity for both cooperation and conflict. The same cognitive abilities that allow us to work together on massive cooperative projects also enable us to engage in large-scale warfare and competition. Understanding these dual tendencies is crucial for building a more peaceful and sustainable future. As we look toward the future, several trends emerging from our evolutionary analysis seem particularly important. The continued acceleration of technological change suggests that future humans may face challenges and opportunities that are completely unprecedented in our evolutionary history. The development of artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and space travel may fundamentally alter what it means to be human. The global nature of modern human civilization means that for the first time in our species history, we face challenges that require coordination and cooperation on a planetary scale. Climate change, pandemic diseases, and resource management all require levels of international cooperation that push the boundaries of our evolved social capabilities. The potential for human enhancement through technology raises profound questions about the future direction of human evolution. As we gain the ability to modify our own biology through genetic engineering, cybernetic implants, and other technologies, we may be entering a phase of directed evolution that differs fundamentally from the natural selection processes that shaped our ancestors. Despite these unprecedented challenges and opportunities, certain fundamental aspects of human nature seem likely to persist. Our need for social connection, meaning, and purpose appears to be deeply rooted in our evolutionary heritage and will probably continue to shape human experience regardless of technological advances. The remarkable journey we've traced from early primates to modern humans demonstrates that change is the only constant in the human story. Every generation has faced new challenges and opportunities, and each has contributed to the ongoing human experiment. We are not the endpoint of human evolution, but rather the current chapter in a story that will continue to unfold for generations to come. Our evolutionary heritage provides both limitations and possibilities for the future. While we cannot escape our biological and psychological inheritance, we can understand it and work with it to create better outcomes for ourselves and future generations. The same capacities for learning, innovation, and cooperation that brought us this far will be essential for navigating whatever challenges and opportunities lie ahead. As we conclude this exploration of human evolution, we're reminded that we are part of something much larger than ourselves. We are the inheritors of millions of years of evolutionary experimentation, the products of countless generations of ancestors who survived and thrived in the face of incredible challenges. We are also the ancestors of future generations who will continue the human story in directions we can barely imagine. The responsibility this inheritance brings is both humbling and inspiring. We have the opportunity to contribute our own chapter to the greatest story ever told. The story of how consciousness arose from matter, how intelligence emerged from chaos, and how a small African primate became the dominant force shaping life on Earth. The human journey is far from over. As we stand at the threshold of new technological capabilities and face unprecedented global challenges, we have the opportunity to consciously direct our own evolution for the first time in our species' history. The choices we make today will determine not just our own fate, but the legacy we leave for all future generations. In the end, the story of human evolution teaches us that we are capable of remarkable things when we work together, learn from our mistakes, and maintain hope for the future. The same ingenuity and cooperation that brought us from the African savanna to the stars will be essential for creating a future worthy of our extraordinary evolutionary heritage. Epilogue: the continuing journey, extended version with additional philosophical depth and future considerations. As our comprehensive journey through 7 million years of human evolution reaches its conclusion, we find ourselves standing at a truly extraordinary vantage point in the story of our species. From those first tentative upright steps taken by our earliest ancestors in the ancient forests of Africa, to the complex global civilization that surrounds us today, the human story represents perhaps the most dramatic transformation in the entire history of life on Earth. Today, over 8 billion humans inhabit virtually every corner of our planet, from the frozen Antarctic research stations to the scorching deserts of the Sahara, from bustling megacities housing tens of millions to remote islands with populations in the hundreds. We have built technologies that would seem like pure magic to our ancestors. Machines that can think, devices that connect every human on Earth in real time, and rockets that carry our emissaries to other worlds. We have split atoms and mapped galaxies, composed symphonies and painted masterpieces that move the human soul, developed medicines that defeat diseases that once decimated populations, and created mathematical theories that describe the fundamental structure of reality itself. We have even begun to manipulate our own genetic code, potentially taking control of our biological evolution for the first time in our species' history. Yet in many fundamental ways, we remain the same species that emerged in Africa 300,000 years ago. Our brains are essentially unchanged from those of our Paleolithic ancestors who painted magnificent animals on cave walls and created the first musical instruments. Our basic emotional and social needs remain rooted in the small group dynamics that characterized human societies for 99% of our evolutionary history. The drives for survival, reproduction, social connection, and meaning that motivated our ancestors as they struggled to survive in hostile environments continue to shape human behavior today, even as we grapple with challenges that our evolutionary history never prepared us to face. The same neural circuits that helped our ancestors detect predators in the African savanna now struggle to process abstract threats like climate change or nuclear war. This remarkable journey we've traced reveals several crucial insights about human nature and our place in the universe that have profound implications for how we understand ourselves and plan for our future. First, and perhaps most importantly, it demonstrates the incredible power of cultural evolution to supplement and sometimes override biological evolution. While our bodies and brains haven't changed significantly in hundreds of thousands of years, Our cultures have undergone continuous and accelerating transformation, allowing us to adapt to new environments and challenges with unprecedented speed and flexibility. A human from 50,000 years ago would be biologically identical to us, but culturally they would be as alien as any science fiction character. Second, our evolutionary history reveals that cooperation and social learning have been the fundamental keys to human success. Every major advancement in human development, from the first deliberately shaped stone tools to the development of agriculture to the rise of scientific civilization, has depended on our extraordinary ability to work together, share knowledge across generations, and build upon the achievements of those who came before us. Individual human intelligence, while remarkable, is not sufficient to explain our species' success. What makes humans unique is our capacity for collective intelligence, our ability to pool our cognitive resources, divide intellectual labor, and create bodies of knowledge that exceed what any individual could achieve alone. The smartphone in your pocket contains more accumulated human knowledge than any individual genius could master in multiple lifetimes. Third, the human story shows that innovation and adaptability are fundamental characteristics of our species that have remained constant throughout our evolutionary history. Time and again, when faced with environmental challenges, resource scarcity, or competitive pressures, humans have responded not just with biological adaptations, but with technological and cultural innovations that not only solved immediate problems, but often opened up entirely new possibilities for development. The study of human evolution also reveals the profoundly contingent nature of our existence. At countless points along our evolutionary journey, our lineage could have gone extinct like so many others. Climate changes that dried up lakes our ancestors depended on, volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun for years, disease outbreaks that decimated small populations, and competition with other species all posed existential threats to our ancestors. The fact that we're here today to tell this story is the result of countless fortunate circumstances, successful adaptations, and chance events that could easily have turned out differently. The survival of our species depended on the courage of small groups who ventured into unknown territories, the innovation of individuals who developed new technologies, and the wisdom of communities that preserved knowledge through dark times. Our evolutionary heritage has profound implications for understanding contemporary human behavior and the unprecedented challenges we face as a species in the 21st century. Many of the psychological tendencies and behavioral patterns that served our ancestors well in small hunter-gatherer groups, including strong preferences for in-group loyalty, suspicion of outsiders, focus on immediate rather than long-term consequences, and difficulty processing statistical information, can create significant problems in our modern, interconnected world. The rapid pace of cultural and technological change in recent centuries has created what researchers call an evolutionary mismatch between our evolved psychology and our current environment. We live in a world of global communications, international commerce, nuclear weapons, and planet-scale environmental challenges. Yet our brains are still fundamentally wired for life in small groups where everyone knew everyone else and the most distant threat might be the neighboring tribe over the next hill. This mismatch helps explain many of the persistent problems that plague modern human societies. Our difficulty in addressing long-term challenges like climate change, our tendency toward political polarization and tribal thinking, our struggles with obesity in environments of food abundance, and our susceptibility to misinformation in the age of social media all reflect the tension between our evolutionary heritage and our current circumstances. However, understanding our evolutionary history can also help us navigate these challenges more effectively. By recognizing the deep evolutionary roots of human behavior, we can better understand why certain problems persist despite our best intentions, and develop more effective solutions to work with rather than against our evolved psychology. 4. Example: our tendency to respond more strongly to immediate, visible threats than to distant, abstract ones helps explain why climate change has been such a difficult problem to mobilize action around, despite overwhelming scientific evidence. Understanding this bias can help us develop communication strategies that make abstract threats more concrete and immediate. The human capacity for cultural learning and innovation that has driven our success throughout evolutionary history continues to be our greatest asset in facing contemporary challenges. Just as our ancestors developed new technologies and social systems to adapt to changing environments, we have the potential to develop solutions to modern problems like climate change, resource depletion, global inequality, and the risks posed by emerging technologies. The story of human evolution also provides crucial perspective on our relationship with other species and the natural world more broadly. For most of our evolutionary history, humans were just one of many primate species struggling to survive in competitive ecosystems. Our current dominance of global ecosystems is a very recent development that carries with it unprecedented responsibilities. The extinction of our closest relatives, the Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, and other human species that once shared the planet with us, serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly even successful evolutionary lineages can disappear. As the only surviving human species, we carry the responsibility not just for our own future, but for preserving the legacy of millions of years of human evolution and for stewarding the planet that gave birth to consciousness itself. Our exploration of human origins reveals that diversity has always been one of the greatest strengths of our lineage. The genetic, cultural, linguistic, and behavioral diversity that characterizes modern human populations reflects millions of years of adaptation to different environments and challenges. This diversity represents a vast repository of human potential, creativity, and resilience that will be crucial for navigating the uncertain challenges of the future. The technological capabilities that humans have developed, particularly in recent decades, have given us powers that no species in Earth's 4 billion-year history has ever possessed. We can now influence global climate patterns, cause mass extinctions, fundamentally alter the genetic makeup of other species, and even potentially destroy all complex life on Earth. With these unprecedented powers comes the moral imperative to use them wisely. Yet the same innovative capacity and cooperative intelligence that has created these challenges also provides hope for solutions. Human ingenuity has repeatedly found ways to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles throughout our evolutionary history. From the development of agriculture that allowed population growth beyond the carrying capacity of natural ecosystems to the Industrial Revolution that transformed human productive capacity to the scientific revolution that revealed the fundamental laws governing reality. Humans have consistently surprised themselves with their ability to create new possibilities and expand the boundaries of what's achievable. The study of human evolution also reveals that our species has an extraordinary capacity for both cooperation and conflict, creation and destruction, wisdom and folly. The same cognitive abilities that allow us to work together on massive cooperative projects also enable us to engage in large-scale warfare and competition. The same technologies that can cure diseases can also create weapons of mass destruction. Understanding these dual potentials is crucial for building a more peaceful and sustainable future. As we look toward the future, several trends emerging from our evolutionary analysis seem particularly important for understanding the trajectory of human development. The continued acceleration of technological change suggests that future humans may face challenges and opportunities that are completely unprecedented in our evolutionary history. the development of artificial intelligence may fundamentally alter the relationship between human intelligence and technological capability. For the first time in our species' history, we may create forms of intelligence that exceed our own cognitive abilities. The implications of this development for human society, individual identity, and our understanding of consciousness itself are profound and largely unknown. Advances in genetic engineering and biotechnology may allow us to consciously direct our own biological evolution for the first time in our species' history. The ability to modify human genetics, enhance cognitive capabilities, extend lifespan, and even create new forms of human-machine hybrids raises fundamental questions about what it means to be human and how we should use these unprecedented powers. The global nature of modern human civilization means that for the first time in our species' history, we face challenges that require coordination and cooperation on a planetary scale. Climate change, pandemic diseases, nuclear weapons, and the management of global resources all require levels of international cooperation that push the boundaries of our evolved social capabilities. Space exploration and the potential for human settlement beyond Earth represent another unprecedented development in our evolutionary history. For the first time since our ancestors left Africa, humans may soon establish permanent settlements in fundamentally alien environments that will require new forms of technological and biological adaptation. Despite these unprecedented challenges and opportunities, certain fundamental aspects of human nature seem likely to persist regardless of technological advances. Our need for social connection, meaning, purpose, and transcendence appears to be deeply rooted in our evolutionary heritage and will probably continue to shape human experience even as our capabilities expand beyond current imagination. The remarkable journey we've traced from early primates to modern humans demonstrates that change and adaptation are the only constants in the human story. Every generation has faced new challenges and opportunities, and each has contributed its own innovations to the ongoing human experiment. We are not the endpoint of human evolution, but rather the current chapter in a story that will continue to unfold for generations, centuries, or millennia to come. Our evolutionary heritage provides both limitations and possibilities for the future. While we cannot entirely escape our biological and psychological inheritance, we can understand it, work with it, and potentially transcend it through conscious effort and technological enhancement. The same capacities for learning, innovation, cooperation, and cultural transmission that brought us from the African savanna to the threshold of the stars will be essential for navigating whatever challenges and opportunities lie ahead. As we conclude this exploration of human evolution, we're reminded that each of us is part of something much larger and more extraordinary than our individual lives. We are the inheritors of millions of years of evolutionary experimentation, the products of countless generations of ancestors who survived and thrived in the face of incredible challenges. We are also the ancestors of future generations who will continue the human story in directions we can barely imagine today. The responsibility this inheritance brings is both humbling and inspiring. We have the opportunity to contribute our own chapter to the greatest story ever told. The story of how consciousness arose from matter, how intelligence emerged from chaos, how cooperation triumphed over competition, and how a small African primate became the dominant force shaping life on Earth and potentially beyond. The human journey is far from over. As we stand at the threshold of new technological capabilities and face unprecedented global challenges, we have the opportunity to consciously direct our own evolution for the first time in our species' history. The choices we make today about how to use our unprecedented powers will determine not just our own fate, but the legacy we leave for all future generations and potentially for life itself. This is our story, the story of how we became human, and the ongoing story of what we might yet become. It's a story without a predetermined ending, a testament to the boundless creativity of evolution and intelligence, and a reminder that the most amazing chapters in the human adventure may still be waiting to be written by us and by the generations that will follow in our footsteps among the stars.